Let's give me let's start the intro and then give me the 5 or 3 count, whatever. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Birds on Radio Row, live from Radio Row. It's Geoff Mosher. Adam Caplan will be with us soon. We've got Andrew DeCecco, and we're going to start off day 2, hour 1 of the Inside the Birds live from Radio Row with Greg Cosell. You see him on Inside the Birds live pregame show and all other Inside the Birds platforms, along with NFL Film senior producer, the matchup show on ESPN. Great to have you back with us, Greg.
I got all dressed up for you, Jeff.
I can see. I like to check
my nice shirt on, a nice sport jacket. You know, I figured I need to bring some class to this operation.
It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. All right. We start off the show today. Obviously, hour 1 of day 2 is brought to you by Ocean Casino Resort. So let's talk about this, Greg. We've got the Super Bowl Sunday coming up. Yep. Eagles, Chiefs. We're not going to be able to have you. You're going to be here, so we won't be able to have you on the pregame show. So there's a lot of talk about Patrick Mahomes. There'll be a lot of talk about Jalen Hurts, right? So everybody's focusing on the quarterbacks, but I focus on this game and on the trenches, and I want to start off there. You have one great offensive line. You have another team with a great offensive line. One team with a great front seven, the other team with a really good front seven. Where do you see right there the game sort of being decided? What's going to be the key factor in the trenches for each team?
I'm going to answer that a little differently, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Okay. Maybe I'll be wrong, and there's many smart football people who will say that games tend to be won and lost in the trenches. We know that. I look at this a little differently. I think that the way the Eagles play offense and the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, I think that particularly with Mahomes, more so than the Eagles, and this is what fascinates me about the game, that Mahomes is the kind of quarterback that can potentially camouflage or compensate for some potential weaknesses on your O-line. Like I think, for instance,
like right tackle.
That's for the Chiefs. Well, I think the right tackle and the left tackle, Andrew Wiley and Orlando Brown, are not really strong pass protectors. So now you're getting into a little more of the weeds of the game, because if it gets to be 3rd and long, that's where that becomes a big factor, obviously, because now you've got Sweat working against Brown. I think that's advantage Eagles. You've got Reddick working against Wiley. That's advantage Eagles. But those are specific down and distance situations. When it's 1st and 10 and the play calling is different, that may not be as big a factor because the play calling can dictate how you can compensate and camouflage a particular weakness. And with the Mahomes factor, and he'll be better than he was 2 weeks ago. Will he be truly 100%? Probably not, but he'll be better. And his movement ability, both within the pocket and outside the pocket, his spatial awareness, which may be better than anybody I've ever seen, and I've been doing this a long time, his ability to see where people are and to sort of then see where they're going to be, I think is maybe better than anybody I've ever seen. So while there will be specific plays, okay, just like there were in the NFC Championship game, for instance, where Mailata and Dickerson just drove Javon Kinlaw 5 yards off the ball. Will there be plays like that? There will be. But I don't know if that's going to be the determining factor in the game.
So it sounds like you think, based on what you're saying, from a.
And I'm not saying I'm picking the Chiefs. That's not my point. I don't want people to say, you're picking the Chiefs because of Mahomes, because we will discuss the Eagles part in this with Hurts as well.
Right.
But I just think that won't be. I don't think we're going to come away from whoever wins this game and just say they won because they were better in the trenches. I think there's going to be more to the game than that.
So from what you're saying, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, knowing how good of a play caller Andy Reid is, knowing that he knows those deficiencies you spoke about, maybe think about more screens, more rollouts, more ways to get Patrick Mahomes away from the areas
or quick game, more RPOs. They're a big RPO team.
Right.
You know, things like that minimize in normal down and distance situations the advantage that the Eagles have, particularly on the edges. And one thing that I've not heard a lot of people talk about this week, and I think it's a fascinating element to this game, is the Chiefs are a heavy multiple tight end offense. They played in the regular season about 40% of their offensive snaps in either 12 or 13 personnel, meaning 2 tight ends or 3 tight ends. And in the AFC Championship game, over 50% of their snaps had multiple tight ends. So now the question is, in normal down and distance situations, 1st and 10, 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, do the Eagles stay base in a 5-2? Do the Eagles go 5-1 nickel? Because the reality is Kelsey is not really an attached tight end.
Right.
He's a receiver. And even someone like Jody Fortson, who's not necessarily a volume receiver, he was a wide receiver in college. So he's another guy that can line up anywhere in the formation. So to me, that personnel matchup, that unit matchup, is going to be fascinating to watch early in the game, how the Eagles choose to match up versus the multiple tight end personnel packages that the Chiefs will undoubtedly throw at them.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, Greg. Knowing Travis Kelce's propensity to take over a game, how do you envision the Eagles deploying their personnel? For me, I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson would make a lot of sense.
Well, I think when they play man, and again, with 2 weeks, teams make tweaks, as we all know, and it's impossible to know what those tweaks will be. All we have is what we have up to this point. The Eagles play a good amount of man. Will they continue to do that? And if they play man, will it be pure man? In other words, I agree with you, Andrew. I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson is the most likely candidate. He's really, to me, the only player who can somewhat match up to Kelsey. There's really not another player who can match up in a strict sense. So now the question is, if they do play man, is it going to be pure man with Gardner-Johnson, or is there some kind of bracket element to it? Well, I don't know. We'll find out. When they play zone, will there be some kind of bracket element to it? Because other than Mahomes, who's obvious, this offense runs through Kelsey.
Absolutely.
And you can't let, I guess, look, we never know how a game's going to play out. If we sit here, if I were to say to you guys, oh, if Kelsey goes 10 for 120, the Eagles are going to lose. Well, we don't know. You never know how a game's going to play out. But the point is, you don't want to go into the game with the idea that Kelsey's going to catch 10 balls. You don't want to think that, okay, we'll give Kelsey 10 balls because maybe he'll dominate the game if you do that. So to me, there's going to have to be a specific plan based on down and distance, field location, what personnel the Eagles have on the field. There's going to have to be a plan for Kelsey. It can't just be, let's play our normal defense. We know how Gannon, we've discussed this, Geoff, for 2 years. We know that Gannon just does not want to give up big plays.
Right.
So, some people have said to me, well, they'll double Kelsey and they'll just play man-to-man across the board. Well, maybe they will on some occasions, but we know that Gannon is not going to want to let, Valdez-Scantling run by anybody. I mean, he's just not going to, that's not the way he thinks about defense. That I think that's one of the most fascinating elements of this game is how the Eagles choose to defend Kelsey depending on down and distance and the other variables.
Oh, another player I wanted to ask you about is Jerick McKinnon.
Oh.
56 catches this year. They're on the Chiefs. Obviously, he's having a career season. What have you seen from him and how they utilize him?
He's become a huge factor in the second half of the season. He's been there, in many ways, and the comparison's not truly apples to apples, but I think it's a good one. He's been there, Brian Westbrook, in terms of the passing game. Obviously, he doesn't run like Westbrook did with the Eagles back in the day when Andy was here, but he's become their Brian Westbrook in the passing game, and he's been really effective in the red zone. And obviously, they get in the red zone a lot. And even though Andy, at his core, does not want to keep people into block, he wants to send 5 out. This may be a situation on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, where he at least needs to chip. Because I remember a completion he threw, I think it might have been to Valdez-Scantling against Jacksonville, where Jacksonville was in a 5-man front and they had a stunt, and Jerick McKinnon had to pick up Trayvon Walker, and he did a really good job. Okay, when I say really good job, he doesn't have to pancake him. He just has to make sure that he doesn't get, run over,
right.
And he did a really good job, and Mahomes was able to step outside the pocket like Mahomes does and make a throw. So McKinnon's also shown himself to be a very good pass protector if needed. But as I said, Andy would prefer not to do that.
Right.
I think he'll start the game not doing that and see if it's required.
Yeah. So 2 questions off that, both based on what you see on tape. I want to ask you if something stands out on tape. First, I want to remind everyone to go get your game on at the Gallery Bar Booking Games and Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City this football season. Cheers your favorite drinks while cheering on your favorite team. Get in on a parlay while in the middle of a party. Go for the sports scene and go for the endless screens. Go to the gallery, go to Ocean, go for the win. For more information, visit theoceanac.com. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So you were talking about the forms of pass protection that there are. Andy is known for always wanting 5 outlets.
That's what he wants.
Jason Avant recently, and some others I've spoken with down here, said they've seen more lately of Andy using guys. He still gets his 5 outlets, but he does put more chips on.
Without
he does
question.
keep some.
So he knows, because the tackles, depending on who the opponent is, and this is an opponent, that's a problem. The tackles can be an issue.
So we're going to most likely see a lot more of that from Andy in this game. Is that something then the Eagles, because these guys can chip, look like they're staying, and then release into the flats? Are those guys dangerous weapons in that regard? Or do the Eagles say, fine, you want to check down to that guy, we'll take that all day long, because you're not going to wind up beating us over the top or getting 20 yards with Travis Kelce?
And then it depends on the down and distance and what the Eagles are playing behind all that.
Right.
Because the last thing you want is, someone like McKinnon chipping, and then he just releases into the flat on 3rd and 7, and maybe they're playing a zone and McKinnon catches it and then gets 12 yards.
Yeah.
That's what you don't want. So then it depends on what you're playing behind it.
Yeah.
And that, we don't know, that becomes a function, as I said, of down and distance, of where you are on the field. But, I think that, like I said, Andy will start without that and then see how it goes. And that's why I'm really curious to see what the Eagles do in terms of their nickel package.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be the 5-1 or the 4-2? Because one of the things with the 5-1 is, and it's not 100%, but it's a high percentage, you pretty much set up one-on-one pass protection across the line.
Right.
And the Eagles have not been a big stunt team this year, but when they've stunted, they've been really successful.
Yeah.
And how many times now, when I say how many times, it's not a big number, but have we seen Riddick on that long stunt where he ends up going through the A gap?
Right.
And so, this is what, again, when you have 2 weeks to prepare, you start to see a few more of the wrinkles that can occur.
Sure.
And we don't know what those wrinkles will be.
We were talking, interestingly, what you brought up about McKinnon is that this is seemingly the first time in a while that Andy has had to have sort of this Patriot style of running, where you have your running back and your pass catching running back. Because going back to his Eagles days, from Deuce to B West to LaShawn McCoy, those guys all caught the ball well.
Right.
And then he had Jamal Charles when he got to the Chiefs.
And he was great.
Hunt.
Yeah.
This is really the first time I've seen him, and he's so good. I mean, he adapts to his personnel so well in that regard.
Yeah. And McKinnon, don't forget, McKinnon was viewed, before he had all those injuries, as being just what he is now. This is sort of what everybody saw him as being. He just kept getting hurt with serious injuries, but he's been really good. And in the red zone, he's been great. They do one thing too, where they work him through the line of scrimmage. So if he's offset to one side, he works through the line of scrimmage to the other side. That's difficult to defend because, number one, if you're in man, there's a lot of traffic that the man defender has to wade through. And if you're in zone, the zone players on the other side are not necessarily focused on McKinnon coming across the formation through the line. So we know that, particularly when you get into the red zone, and you could look at the red zone teams, define it differently. Most people think it's 20 yards in. Some teams think of it as 25 yards in. The point is that the Chiefs are very, very creative in what they do. And there's going to be something that they haven't done and that the Eagles haven't seen. We know that. We just don't know what it's going to be.
Right. I think Jerick McKinnon is actually going to be their X factor. You talk about those quick outlets with a quarterback is not going to be 100%. I do think that he's going to be one of those players.
Andrew, you must have seen my format for the matchup show, which we're going to shoot Saturday here in Old Town Scottsdale for ESPN, because there's a thing in the show where I did for Darius Butler and I to say, on that side of the ball, who's kind of your X factor. And I'm giving this away now, but for me, it was Jerick McKinnon.
That's mine.
So
too.
I think, so we see it the same way.
Yeah. I mean, I almost feel like he could be the sort of the James White that for Tom Brady, which is, you're nickel and diming, but if you do it enough and all of a sudden you're at the 10-yard line and you got Travis Kelce there to help you in the red zones.
You may not have been thinking that you made this point, but it's a great point. Mahomes, as he's advanced in his career, has become much more comfortable being patient.
Right.
So if he senses that the big throws are not there, then he will do that. Right. He will throw the 8-yard ball and just keep moving the chains. Right. That's something. It really started last year when he had that tough stretch for him early in the season. And Andy intuitively understood that he had to get him kind of back on track. And so about week 6 or 7 last year, they started to shorten the drops, get the ball out quick, get Mahomes back in rhythm. And that's one area of Mahomes' game where he's really become more refined and more advanced. He is more than willing now to take those throws. Absolutely. And I think if Jonathan Gannon is going to play zone, and I don't want to say give him throws, but you know what I'm saying. I think that, he'll take those throws, whereas maybe 3 years ago, he might have looked to, push it down the field.
Right.
And so again, look, that's why you asked the question about the trenches. You have the Mahomes factor, and Mahomes is so good that he could compensate for a lot of this stuff by the way in which he plays. And again, I'm not saying that means the Chiefs win the game. We don't know, we don't know any of this.
Sure.
But, Mahomes is really, really good. And I think he's matured as a player. And, he now understands that you don't have to win the game, in the first quarter.
Right. So all I got from that whole conversation there was that if I make a
all you got
point,
from my BS,
it might be unintentional. Let me ask you really quick. I said I want to ask you 2 things that might stand out from a tape standpoint.
Right.
People who I've talked to about Travis Kelce, because people always say, well, if the Eagles just shut down Travis Kelce, he's their only weapon, then.
But everybody says that.
Right. So the one thing I hear a lot is that he does not run routes conventionally, that he has a intentional or planned freelance within many of his routes to be at a certain place that the defender could not anticipate, but Patrick Mahomes and him are in such sync with that. When you watch tape, you say, well, that's weird. I've never seen that kind of dipsy-do kind of move in there.
I don't know the answer to that because we'd have to be there to know that.
Sure.
I will say this, that it's very clear that he has such a great feel for reacting to Mahomes' movement. He has an unbelievable feel for finding space in response to Mahomes. I mean, when they run conventional routes, like for instance, there are certain routes, you're going to see certain route concepts from the Chiefs. You're going to see flood, 3-level stretch. They get to it in multiple ways, out of multiple personnel and multiple formations. You're going to see Kelce run crossing routes. You're going to see certain things that are part of the Andy Reid offense. Now, what happens is when Mahomes moves, everything changes. And I think one of the key factors, and I had a great conversation with a defensive coach a couple of summers ago. I think it was the pandemic summer when I was sitting at home just calling coaches, having great conversations, these great 2-hour conversations where I learned so much. And I remember one defensive coach, very well known in the league, telling me that when you play Mahomes, you really almost have to have 2 defenses. You have to have a defense for the first 2.2 seconds, and then you have to have some kind of answer for what happens afterwards. Right. And that's hard because the whole discipline of the plays break down. And that's where Kelce is so good. And Mahomes is obviously so good too. So, again, the Eagles have to be well aware of that. And it'll be coached. It'll be talked about. It'll be, reiterated over and over again. It'll be stuff they talk about Saturday night. I mean, they'll go over this ad nauseum, but, you still have to do it. And it's hard.
Somebody asked Travis Kelce at his presser this morning, Greg, why are you always open? He goes, why am I always open? I say this all the time. Andy Reid, baby.
Yeah. I mean, they have great route concepts. They're really good. I mentioned the flood. They get to that in so many ways. And they can do it against zone. They can do it against man. Zone is ideally where it really works for the simple reason that there's voids. But hey, he caught a 39-yard touchdown on a flood concept against the Rams this year, where Jalen Ramsey was matched on Kelce one-on-one, and Kelce adjusted his route because it was man coverage. If it was zone, he would have run the route a certain way. He's almost always the intermediate receiver in the 3-level concept, the tiered concept. But he changed the way he ran his route because Ramsey was playing press man on him. He was the point man in the bunch, Kelce. And, Kelce is so good at making those kinds of route adjustments based on the coverage. That's probably not talked enough about with Kelce because he's so great physically. But, he's a really, really smart player.
Now, one other player that I wanted to ask you about is the Valdez-Scantling, right? I mean, when the Eagles have gotten beat deep, it's been James Bradbury. He got beat in the Saints game. He got beat in the Texans game.
By Shaheed on the vertical, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you see? How do you see that matchup playing out? And do you think that how do you think he stacks up in that matchup?
They'll test him. They'll test him for sure because Bradbury, I think he's had a really good season. but I think most people would agree that he's not necessarily fast. That's not his game.
Right.
He's not a 4-3-8 guy. He'll get tested. They'll take shots. There'll be some double moves. They'll do those kinds of things. And then it depends on whether they connect. I mean, obviously, if they connect, that's a problem for the Eagles. If they don't connect, then you go on to the next play. But no, he will be tested for sure. The big question, to me, is what percentage of man versus what percentage of zone do they play? And I think we've seen, we know Gannon's general philosophy, and this is very general, that he just does not want to give up big plays. But again, no coordinator does. It all depends on how you execute that. We've talked about this for 2 years, that's his thing. He and there's nothing wrong with that as an overriding philosophy, because in a sense, what the league has become for most teams, okay, is offensively, how do we create explosives, and defensively, how do we prevent explosives? Now that's a simplification, but it's true. So the last thing the Eagles want to do in this game is all of a sudden, in the first quarter on the second possession, Mahomes hits Valdez-Scantling for a 60-yard touchdown. That's the last thing you want to. You'd rather have, death by 1,000 cuts. I'm not saying you want Kelsey to catch 15 balls, but hey, if they're throwing it to Kelsey and it's 7 yards and 7 yards, you're not saying, wow, that's wonderful, but you'd much rather line up and play defense again than have a 60-yard touchdown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Eagles offensively, Greg, and how they'll attack Kansas City.
You got to do that because they're good.
They've been showing some pistol formation lately.
Yeah.
More. I imagine that's to not give the tell away to where the running back wants to go.
Another unintentional great point you just made.
So how does that factor into what Steve Spagnuolo must be thinking this week?
And I'll tell you why it's a great point, because every time I've talked to a defensive coach when I'm at the combine, when I have lunch with guys and I try to learn more, and I'll say, oh, they're in a 2x2 or 3x1. You know what the first question I ask, they say to me is, where's the back? Because the back dictates so much. Yep. So when the back's offset, obviously he's either offset strong or weak.
Right.
Okay. Where if he's behind the quarterback, he's neither strong nor weak. So that I'm sure the Eagles have started to get a bit of a tell from defenses on how they're playing when the back's offset strong and the back's offset weak. So now their response is, well, we're going to go do a little more pistol because now it's a little tougher for you pre-snap to know what we're doing.
Sure.
So that's a great point.
It goes back maybe to the Chicago game where Chicago said, we're going to make Jalen Hurts keep the ball.
Right.
We know which way they want the running back is going to go. We're going to crash down on him, then bring our middle defender around wherever we think Jalen Hurts is going to go. Which here's dictated that.
So here's the issue. And here's one thing the Eagles have also done when they go offset, not just pistol. Almost always when you watch tape of every team, if a team lines up with trips to one side and a single receiver to the other side, almost always the back is offset to the single receiver. What the Eagles did, and they did this, and I'll mention the plays in a minute because Eagles fans listening will remember the plays. What the Eagles have started to do now is offset the back strong. Mm-hmm. So it's what we call 4 strong. That is really harder to defend. So on that touchdown drive that ended with the Sanders 13-yard touchdown, you remember Gainwell had a 17-yard run as well?
Yep.
Both those plays were the exact same formation. They lined up in 4 strong. It was tight bunch with the back, Gainwell and Sanders offset to that side. That poses a problem for the defense because if you run routes against zone with 4 strong, that's a problem. They don't have enough people. Right. So now the defense has to shift to that side. And what did the Eagles do? They went weak with the inside zone run and they got 3-on-3 to the weak side, and they'll take that every single time.
That's your numbers advantage and your size advantage with that offensive line.
Correct. Yeah. And if we recall in that game, because of the strong side, the 4 strong, is then you have Fred Warner, the best linebacker in the game and one of the most intuitive and smartest. He's kind of stuck. He's not moving because he has to wait and see what's going to happen.
He's in flux.
He's in conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to do. So, in two different ways, this game is about the quarterbacks. Mahomes, we know about, we talked about him, but the Eagles offense, and I wish we had talked about this more, and I kind of regret that we didn't when Hurts was hurt. The Eagles offense is about Hurts, not because he's as good a passer as Mahomes. He's not. Right. That's not a profound statement, okay? But the bottom line is the Eagles offense runs through Hurts because of all the different play elements that can occur with Hurts in the gun. Like on those 2 plays I mentioned, there were 5 plays that could have come from that. Just from that formation. And for all we know, the play call might have just been inside zone.
Right.
It might have been as simple as that. That's just the play call, and all the other stuff is just to show the defense something else.
The things that must be going on in the heads, right?
Right.
The line, like Nick Bolton on Sunday,
Right,
Willie
right,
Gay and
right.
safeties. It's going to be, you can probably see them processing
Right.
as it's going on.
So that's the issue, because on those plays here, just to give the audience an example, here's what you have. You have the inside zone run, you've got zone read, you've got RPO, you've got the bubble screen to Goddard because it's a tight bunch, and you've also got a fade to the X receiver Smith because it was press man. So any one of those plays could happen. And like I said, for all we know, it might just have been called inside zone, and there you go.
Right.
But there's so much potentially going on, and it's all because of the Hurts factor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's that I think
It's for someone like me, this is so fascinating. I think that regardless of who wins this game, I know if the Eagles lose, fans are going to act like the season's been a disappointment. That's just the nature of fans. But I think what Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, and Brian Johnson, all the offensive coaches, what they've done this year, understanding Hurts, is fascinating.
Right.
I mean, I think it's really been terrific coaching. Now, a couple of points that need to be made. While the Eagles' run game is obviously terrific, the reality is they're a pass-first team in the first half of games. They come out throwing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a stat I found out actually from Mike Tannenbaum yesterday, and I didn't know this, so I'm not going to say that, hey, it's my stat. But the stat was this. Jalen Hurts has only thrown 22 passes in the second half this year with the Eagles behind. Think about that.
Wow. That reminds me, do you remember, the Doug Peterson, Bill Belichick conversation before the Super Bowl, where Bill says, I was looking for film of you guys from behind to see how you react, and I couldn't find it.
Right. So again, it's easy to say that you want to get into a game where the Eagles have to become a drop back passing team in the second half, where all these other variables that we just spoke about with Eagles offense can't happen. But so far, the Eagles, with the exception of Indianapolis, and even that game, they were only really down one score. So it wasn't like because even that final drive, as you guys recall, that was not a passing drive.
No, not at all. Yeah.
They've never been in a game where they pretty much had to abandon the way they want to play offense and just become a drop back passing team.
Yeah.
With Hurts, I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, we have
not seen that. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say you can't do it. Right. I would never say that because we don't know. But I think that's the belief that, hey, you'd like to see the Eagles in the second half in a situation where Jalen has to be a drop back passer.
Greg, I wanted to ask you about the Kansas City secondary. They have a lot of youth back there. Trent McDuffie, LJ Sneed, Jalen Watson.
In their dime, they play three rookies, which is being an overlooked element, Andrew, of this game. That's a remarkable deal for Spagnuolo and that staff, that they've been able to play three rookies in their dime, and they play 6 DBs, 26% of their snaps. Mm-hmm. So they're a big dime team, and they've been able to function with three rookies.
Right. I think Watson had like 2 interceptions in the postseason.
I mean, Watson, McDuffie, Brian Cook, who I love coming out of the University of Cincinnati.
How's McDuffie playing? He's a guy the Eagles like.
He's a really good player. I loved him coming out.
He told me he played about 25-30% nickel this year, but a lot of outside.
Yeah, I have a feeling, because in the last number of weeks, they've been jumping around with Sneed and McDuffie. My sense is Sneed will stay outside in their nickel and dime because of the Smith and Brown.
Sure.
And and McDuffie will go inside.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. All right, Greg, if anybody out there wants to ask Greg Cosell a question, we did have someone submit a question for you.
Let's do it. Let's rock and roll.
Just leave it in the chat box and we'll ask Greg the question. This is a little bit difficult because I know you don't like to be pinned down to one thing or another.
No, hey.
But the question is...
I'll make it up if I don't,
Even better.
Yeah.
You could be like me and make an unintentional salient.
There you go.
What does Greg think is the number one key for both teams to win, and which is more likely to come into fruition? So it's not going to be a two-parter. What's the number one key for each team? And after you say that, which do you think is the most likely of the two to happen?
Boy, those are hard questions for me because we just talked about so many variables, and that's the way I see the game. I don't see the game as, hey, if this happens,
Right.
I think that the Eagles' ability to defend Mahomes' movement is going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah.
If they can't defend his movement, if he's making plays outside the structure of the offense, which means it's also outside the structure of the Eagles' defense, then I think that's going to pose a problem. If we start to see that early in the game, I think that's going to be problematic. And then on the other side of the ball, I think the Eagles, I said that they've been a passing team. It would not surprise. I'm not saying they're all of a sudden going to be a running team. I'm not, they're not going to come out 80% of their snaps in the first half and run the ball. But I think the Eagles' ability, when they do run early in the first half, to run effectively will be a big factor, because there's something. Say what you want, we're in a passing league, everybody knows that. But there is something about running the ball and moving people that is different than, a 15-yard completion.
Right.
It may not gain as many yards necessarily,
Sure.
but if all of a sudden Chris Jones is getting moved, Derek Notty's getting moved, Nick Bolton can't seem to find his way, and he's a very good linebacker, by the way.
Very good.
If he can't find his way, there's just something about that I think is different than just throwing the football.
Right. So they're the multidimensional ability of that.
Yes.
And I would almost think, if I'm going to read your mind, because that's what the Eagles just generally do, that's probably more likely to come into fruition than them maybe struggling against the movement of Mahomes.
Right.
Sure, they'll get beat a few times.
They will.
Sure. But they may also win a couple of battles on that, because you're moving a guy who's got a gimpy ankle to begin with.
And he'll be better than he was 2 weeks ago. But,
Sure.
I mean, based on doctors and all that, they say that he can't be 100%, with a high ankle sprain after 3 weeks.
Now, you are a superstar on radio. I've never seen so many people actively see that you are in the middle of a live interview and still have no shame. Hey, how you doing, man? Respond to them. You don't look like a nice guy, but you're a superstar here.
I just show up. I just, hey, I just do my job.
Just do your job.
I just do my job.
Do it well.
But this game, I get asked, and obviously when we do Inside the Birds pregame, I pick a score. I'm really having a tough time with this game.
It sounds like you feel it's going to be a fairly high score, like a ball movement type of game.
The game, though, that resonates in my memory was the 2007 Super Bowl with the Giants and the Patriots, when I thought that was the year the Patriots, were undefeated, the whole deal. And and I actually picked the Giants to win the game. I was one of the few, but I thought it would be a high scoring game. And of course it was 17-14,
right?
Which also brings the idea back to Steve Spagnuolo. It's not his first rodeo, and he will have something. And we don't know if it's going to work or not, but he's also not just going to line up and play against the Eagles offense the way he would play against any offense in the league.
Right.
He will have some. Spags is among the best in the league. The guy's a Super Bowl champion.
Right.
So he'll have something. Whether it works or not, I don't know. But I mean, I was just, reacting to your point is, I picked a high scoring game because I remember specifically in that Giants Patriots game picking 34-31 Giants based on also their final regular season game. Remember that? Where I think it was 35-31.
Right. It was, They were even questioned for trying. And
right.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking like 31-27 in this game. And I could go either way, I
was going to say, you need a team at the end.
I know. I've done it a few times here being on Radio Row, and I picked the Eagles 31-27.
Okay.
So I'll stand by it because, you know how that goes. It's out there already.
Sure.
But again, could this be a 2017 game? I mean, who would have thought, I guess in some ways that the Chiefs Bengals game would have been that, I think a lot of people would have thought that would have been a high scoring game. So, there's so many variables, but I let's put it this way. Back to the initial point, it's easy to say, and maybe it will play out that way, that, well, the Eagles are better in the trenches, so they win. I don't think it's going to be quite, because Andy Reid knows that.
Right.
And Andy Reid's done this a few times. So has Steve Spagnuolo. They know that.
Right.
So they're not just going to play into that.
So the Spagnuolo angle is interesting.
Yeah.
Because ever since he came back to Andy with Kansas City, and I think he's always been aggressive, but he clearly does not mind taking more chances because he knows that if his team gets beat, the offense comes on the field, they go down the field and score a touchdown. Well, he's got a bailout card, but I don't know if you can sort of have that mentality against an Eagles team that can also go up and down the field as well as they can.
Well, the thing about Spags is he can do anything, okay? And you don't know what degree he'll do in this game. I spoke to a quarterback coach last week, I guess, who played against the Chiefs this year. And when I asked him about Spags, the first thing he said was he's a pain in the ass. And he meant that in a complimentary, positive way, because he does so many things that can screw up an offense. But we just spoke about the Eagles offense and how they can screw you up too. So I think that chess match to me is so fascinating.
Absolutely.
And believe me, I'm not smart enough to know exactly how that's going to play out.
Are you worried about free rushers? Because even against the Niners, a couple of times
Yes.
it looked like they got a free rusher.
Yeah, they did.
And a four-man
Spags
rush.
is really good at that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could happen in the game for sure. You know, one thing the obviously because the game ended up being a blowout, but one thing that was clearly part of the 49ers game plan is their edge rushers, Bosa and Ebukam or Amenahu. They clearly were doing a little bit of what we call the must rush. They would rush, stop at the level of Hurts. And you know, and then how many times in that first half did we see Jalen just roll out to the right and throw the ball away?
Sure.
Because he didn't have anywhere to run.
Right.
You know, so I don't know if Spags will do that. You know, there's many ways to sort of try to keep a quarterback in the pocket.
Yeah.
You know, but there'll be some part of his game plan will involve that.
By the way, that mush rush is helping Lane Johnson in a bit. You see how
Without
quickly
question.
he's firing back off the ball. And then when the D end or the edge rusher just sort of like calms the rush, that's a less impact that he has
Without
to worry.
question.
Good point.
That's a great point because, you know, everybody
It's totally accidental.
look, I think Lane Johnson to me and Trent Williams are the best tackles in the league, hands down. So I don't need, you know, to defend Lane Johnson. I think he's an unbelievably great player. But, you know, everybody said, oh, what a great job he did against Bosa. Well, Bosa stopped on a lot of those rushes.
Exactly.
Now, maybe he would have done a great job, but that was not the way the game played out.
Right. Greg, it's been great catching up. Did you, I know you always like to be here to catch up with some people.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Have a conversation that is sort of enlightening for you. Have you had some really good meaty conversations?
I have. Yeah.
Besides this one?
Well, you know, I
intentional ones.
No, and it's funny. I love talking quarterbacks too, and I had some great conversations about quarterbacks, and you know, because I've started doing some draft work, you know, and we'll hopefully be doing that, and I started to watch some quarterbacks in the draft, and I watched some of them last summer too from the 2021 season. So, you know, that's always fascinating to me because, you know, everybody says, well, you can't get there without a quarterback, but you know, there's not going to be 20 transcendent quarterbacks. You still got a lot, you know, it's like the whole thing now with Daniel Jones. The reports are he wants 35 million. And a lot of people are like, well, the Giants should just get rid of him. Well, we know Daniel Jones is not a top 5 quarterback, but you got to line up with a quarterback.
Yeah.
You know, so it's easy to say, well, okay, just get rid of him. Okay, well, who's going to play quarterback? I mean, you know, you got to line up with one.
Question 32 teams. Most of 32 teams wonder every day.
Because you know what? There's not 20 Patrick Mahomes in the, you know, that are just falling out of the sky.
There you go.
You know?
Hey, real quick, let me get you around non-Super Bowl stuff.
Sure.
Because we've talked a little bit about the Bills. Josh Allen. They asked him to do too much.
Without question.
In your mind, they've got to a little diversify that offense more.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're letting the tape be your guide, okay, and this may come across to a lot of people as you know, just not right, but I'm letting the tape be my guide. They've got a below-average NFL offensive line. They don't really have a run game. With the run game and the pass game have no synchronicity at all. You know, it doesn't work together at all. They really only have one receiver they can count on every week. So really it's Josh be great. And I think we all got mesmerized last year in those 2 playoff games when Allen was superhuman. I mean, literally, he might have played the 2 best games by a quarterback in the playoffs back to back that we've seen. It's obviously he lost the second one through no fault of his own.
Right.
I mean, he was ridiculously great in those games. And I think everybody just starts to think, hey, that's Josh Allen every week. And it's too hard to play that way.
Right.
It's just too hard to play that way.
Right.
You can't go into a game every week and say, if my quarterback is not great, we can't win.
Right.
And, you know, so we'll see what happens. But he's taking a brunt of criticism. And the people who are saying that, quite frankly, they don't, to me, based on tape, they don't have an understanding of the offense and the personnel.
Sure. Now, how about Brian Schottenheimer as the Cowboys offensive coordinator? What kind of difference will that make?
Yeah, I know Shotty pretty well. So, you know, look, when he was in Seattle with Wilson, a lot of people thought he did a great job. He's been doing this a long time. You know, I think he's a good quarterback coach. You know, I think that's a good move. I mean, they wanted to stay in-house. I'm sure, you know, Dak Prescott as being very ritualistic in the way he approaches the game. And I'm sure they did not want to totally change everything. And they had Shotty as whatever his title was this year, consultant, you know, who knows, but I think they probably wanted to keep the continuity with some different thought processes, but keep the continuity. So I think that's probably a good move.
Okay. How about looking at it from an Eagles perspective? Shane Steichen, he's gotten quite a bit of looks, much like Jonathan Gannon. What have you seen from Shane and his evolution as a play caller?
I think he's an interesting guy because he's obviously had a different quarterback than Jalen Hurts from where he came from prior to the Eagles. So I think he has a pretty good sense of working with different kinds of quarterbacks. Because look, the Eagles are not a drop back passing team. I think, as I said, they've done an unbelievable job understanding Hurts and understanding how he can best be utilized. And Hurts has gotten better as a drop back thrower, but that's not really the core of how they play. We've seen him throw some great deep balls this year. And they're going to take those shots, by the way, in the Super Bowl, because they're going to test those corners without question. But I think overall, I watch the Eagles offense and I feel like it's a really difficult offense to defend. And I think that's all you can ask for. I mean, then it comes down to execution by players, but I think they're a really difficult offense to defend with their schemes, their concepts, how they approach it. You can always pick out individual plays. Defensive coaches get paid too. You're going to get beat sometimes, but I think their overall approach, the overall execution. I mean, this team scores a lot of points. They put up a lot of yards. I think it'd be hard to really say a whole lot negative. Anybody can do that, pick out a play. That's easy. But I think overall they've done a great job.
Yeah. Last thing we asked you, I asked about Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas. How about Kellen Moore now?
Yeah.
With the Chargers offense, Justin Herbert, Eckler. Is that a good move for them? Well,
I think what the Chargers would like to see is I think they'd like to see a little more verticality in their pass game. I wasn't there with Joe Lombardi, and I know they had major offensive line issues, but that pass game always seemed to me on tape to be very rhythmic, quick game. And I think Herbert is good at that. I think he's robotic and mechanical in a good way. He can drop back, deliver the football. But I think they would probably want a little more verticality because he's a big, strong arm kid who can drive the ball down the field. And we all know that Lombardi wouldn't have been fired if they beat Jacksonville. All they needed was one more field goal, and then he wouldn't have been fired. I mean, that's the way things work out. I'm not taking sides on that. I'm not there. But, I think Kellen Moore is probably, just based on what the tape shows, probably going to be a little more creative. And I don't mean creative in a gimmick way, but, do a little more with the intermediate and vertical passing game because you got a quarterback that obviously is as talented as any in the league.
Right. All right. Great stuff. Greg, we're going to miss you on Sunday.
I know.
I'm going to be there for Inside the Birds pregame live. That's all right.
I'll be at the NFL tailgate. I'll be thinking about you guys.
I'm sure you will be.
Maybe I won't be, but
probably not intentionally.
You're right.
But we will have you back, of course, on the Inside the Birds platform. Last year, we did the Intel with Greg Cosell. It was a 10-week
great,
video. Sorry,
and I've already started watching,
And we're going to bring that back. So Greg Cosell is not going anywhere. He will be with Inside the Birds, even into the offseason. So say goodbye to everybody for a little bit, Greg.
See you, everybody.
All right. Thanks for having Thanks for stopping by. Take care. All right. I'll grab that microphone from you because our live stream is going to continue throughout the hour here. So we'll let Greg kind of make his way out. Andrew will stay there. Adam Caplan will be joining us momentarily, I believe, if we can get him. But a lot of good stuff there. Thank you, Greg. A lot of good game breakdown from Greg. And Andrew, as we kind of go through our takeaways there, I think both of these defensive coordinators are not getting a whole lot of sleep this week. I mean, they're trying to figure out a way to stop these offenses.
I mean, you're going against an all-world tight end, Travis Kelce.
Right.
And a multifaceted offense that has a lot of different playmakers they can kind of put in space and put defenses in conflict. And then you have Eagles that have three receivers. And I've asked a lot of the Chiefs defensive backs this question today, Geoff. You have three receivers that can beat you in a multitude of ways. And, Justin Reed said, oh, yeah, all the different Batmans. He goes, I know.
No, he knows about Swole Batman. He knows about Skinny Batman. All right.
He knows about it. And he said, I want the Goddard assignment.
Yeah. See, man, the Eagles are people in Philadelphia thinking the Eagles are either not getting respect or they're not.
He knew all about it
enough, but it sounds like, you go ask the Chiefs, which you spent some time with this morning and yesterday, and they're pretty well aware of who the Eagles are.
All of them. They were well aware of all of it. So you're right. I think it's a Philadelphia thing. I think they're getting, generally, we're like you said, we're here at the epicenter. They're getting all the respect that you would expect a team that's 14-3 through the regular season would get.
All right, good stuff. Hang with us because we're still here in hour one of Inside the Birds live from Radio Row. This is day 2 of Inside the Birds live from Radio Row. We are going to get Jason Avant fairly soon. If not here at the end of hour 1, then we will get him most likely in hour 2. Working on Brian Baldinger. I know Adam Caplan will join us soon, and he's also walking around right now trying to nab some guests. In fact, it's funny. I see Clay Harbor. We had him on yesterday. He's walking around. You're seeing
I saw Tom Melvin today.
you saw Tom Melvin?
Yeah,
Get out of
he
here.
was with the Chiefs.
All right. Oh, of course, because you was with the Chiefs.
I wanted to talk to him and ask him about that.
Ask him about Clay Harbor.
Yeah.
He's gonna say, of all the people to ask me about on Super Bowl week, you want to ask me about Clay Harbor from about 8 years ago.
Well, your name came up yesterday.
Well, I did see former NFL MVP Sean Alexander walking around a little bit before. I see former Chiefs offensive lineman Geoff Schwartz, former Panthers offensive lineman as well.
My guy
Geoff Schwartz.
Andrew Hawkins is around here.
Andrew
somewhere,
Hawkins
and
is around.
and I got to connect with him.
Yeah. Now, our viewers don't know. We haven't aired it yet, but Adam and I caught up this morning with Ed Kelsey, father of Jason Kelsey, father of Travis Kelsey, and we were able to sit down with him for a really awesome interview. At some point, we're just going to make sure that it's got to get formatted right. It wasn't done on a live stream.
Okay.
So we will have that to you at some point, either today or tomorrow morning or
I can't
on
wait
the
to check it out.
platform. It was really cool. It was, and the funny thing is, Ed Kelsey's voice is kind of like a hybrid of Jason's and Travis's. It's like you could see where both of them get that sort of. They sound like they're talking in a cave all the time voice.
Jason's voice goes in and out sometimes.
It does. It does. All right. I told you that the hour one is brought to you by Ocean Casino Resort. Get in on the action with the Gallery's $10,000 big game sweepstakes at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. That's Sunday, February 12th. All you got to do is place a sports bet at the Gallery and you receive an entry into your chance to be one of 5 winners. The prizes include tickets to Aaron Lewis, an overnight stay, $1,000 free play, tickets to your favorite concert or game, and the grand prize, a 3-night stay in a luxurious suite and a $1,500 Ocean gift card. The Gallery's $10,000 big game sweepstakes is Sunday, February 12th, only at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. For more details, visit theoceanac.com. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Man, if that's not a great prize sweepstakes by Ocean, I mean, what a beautiful casino, beautiful resort, great sports book.
Great location.
Yeah, $1,500 gift card. I would get in on that as soon as I possibly could.
Now
That is really good stuff. So, all right. What was your main takeaway there from my main takeaway is that these defenses are going to be, they got their work cut out for them. I mean, you can even play well from an assignment standpoint, and it's still going to be kind of difficult to actually carry out and execute the assignment.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the stresses that Patrick Mahomes can put on a defense, but even just hearing Greg break it down, what he's able to do outside of structure, even with that ankle injury, and to put defenses in a bind like that, I mean, it's not something you can plan.
No,
it's not something you can plan for.
No, you know, the other thing that stood out from that standpoint, Andrew, is that Greg said that watching tape, he can see that Patrick Mahomes is a lot more patient now, a lot more understanding of what he wants to do. And if you're really going to say like what has been his bugaboo in the last few years, right? If you go back to the Tampa Bay loss 2 years ago, obviously a lot of that, not his fault. They're blitzing him like crazy. Offensive line has 4 injuries, 4 backups. But you could see he was like nervous, frenetic, just trying to do what he could. He was not relaxed. He was not calm. And even going back to somewhat of the game against the Bengals last year, once they started to disguise what they were doing and switch things up, and he had to hold on to the ball a little bit longer or didn't know exactly where to go, he got a little frenetic. Sounds like Greg is saying that he's grown and the offense that Andy Reid has designed has allowed him to function a little bit more comfortably if read number 1 isn't there. Maybe losing in that regard Tyreek Hill forced Patrick and the entire offense and the staff to sort of redesign their offensive philosophy and thinking on what they want to do in certain situations.
I think it's possible. And I also want to touch on something that you made. It was a really astute point that you made about the mush
I did it on purpose, I swear.
It was the mush rush that they did, that the Bears did, and you saw it against the 49ers.
Right.
And how it alleviated pressure on Lane Johnson, but also it clouded the running lanes for Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
That those lanes weren't there, and that's a big part of what the Eagles like to do. I think we should kind of dig a little bit deeper into that throughout the week, and because I think that could be one of the big equalizers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a prolific element to their game, and if he can't run the ball where he wants to at times, or if he gets to that point where he starts running around the pocket instead of into the lanes that he's accustomed to running through. That's advantage Kansas City there. Although we haven't really seen that a whole lot yet, but certainly if
But it's on tape.
yeah, it is on tape. That's a great point. It's there. You when you were with the Chiefs this morning,
Yeah.
what was their takeaway on Jalen Hurts?
Great player, gets the ball out, utilizes his weapons. You know, they were very complimentary, Jeff.
Okay.
And they didn't really give away too much. They were also complimentary of the Eagles' weapons, but they also they're confident in what they have. They're a cohesive bunch. They said that they all work together in unison back there, and they're up for the challenge. And
I would hope so.
Yeah, well, you would hope so. But I had a chance to talk to Jalen Watson, who of course had 2 interceptions in the postseason. I talked to Trent McDuffie, talked to Justin Reed, and you know they're going to have their hands full, and they're going to probably make some mistakes. But they're not going into this scared at all, given the matchup.
You know, it's funny. The Eagles' 2017 rally cry was the hungry dogs run faster. They had never won a Super Bowl.
Right.
They were starting to get doubted because Nick Foles was their quarterback and Carson Wentz. And that became the underdog thing and the hungry dogs run faster. And even though the Chiefs have won a Super Bowl, right? And even though that this is not new to them, third one in the last 4 years, I do think losing last year in the AFC Championship game that they were supposed to win, at least Vegas wise, right?
Yeah.
And then the way they lost against the Bucks 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, and the fact that there's now some distance between when they did beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. I wonder if did you get any sense that there's the chip on their shoulder because they haven't been winning the big one like the people have expected them to?
And that makes them even scarier. And I sort of did get that, but there's a quiet confidence with them. Obviously, one thing that my main takeaway from Andy Reid's press conference is that one, he has the team locked in and focused. He was very calm, and the demeanor from Patrick Mahomes is very calm. But I think that there's something to what you said. I think there is a chip on their shoulder.
Mhm.
They do have something to prove. Travis Kelce today said that he wants to almost make amends for the way that things happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And somebody followed up on that, and he said, you know, I want to be a better leader, want to make more plays. So like they're not going into this, you know, resting on their laurels. They're going into this well aware of what they need to do. And I think you're going to see that manifest itself early.
You know, he's come a long way. If you remember Travis Kelce earlier in his career, they played in some big games that, and even Ed Kelce sort of mentioned, and I don't know if this was alluding to, but I think he was. At one point in our interview with him, he said, you know, I don't know if Travis felt that Kansas City was going to be a long-term home for him. And I don't know if he meant that as, you know, it's a very small town and he's a big personality guy, or if the fact that earlier in his career, he had some lose his cool moments on national TV, and that they would talk about that. And Andy is not a big fan of that. We know he almost sent Freddie Mitchell home from the Super Bowl in 2004 just for talking too much smack about Patriots quarterback. So I think maybe also Ed was alluding to, I don't know if there's going to be the right mix here of personality to franchise the head coach.
Sure.
But Travis has done a really good job of maintaining that great enthusiasm he has, right? Being that big time personality, but also not losing his cool in the big moments. You know, I don't remember last year or the year before where I think, didn't he take his helmet off once? Earlier in his career, I think he's done a good job of sort of being who he wants to be,
keeping his emotions in check
without making it all about him and having him get in hot water.
Yeah, and that's that you know, it's a testament to his leadership and his evolution as a player. I really do think that he matured, and that was really conveyed in the way that he answered his questions today. And it's really the responsibility that they give him every week to do that,
right?
To do what he does.
Right. All right. Like I mentioned, coming up soon, we're gonna have Jason Avant. You want to slide in for the last few minutes here as we close out hour one? Adam Caplan is going to join us.
What's happening,
boys?
How you doing, man?
Busy. It's the Super Bowl.
So you missed it. Greg Cosell made some great points, and
He
if
did?
I made a great point, it might or might not have been intentional. According to Greg, we love Greg.
Does Greg ever smile? Unless he's laughing.
He did. He smiled a couple
Did he?
times.
Listen, let me tell you,
Yeah.
5 or
Because he
6
told me he was great.
came
No,
out
I heard him say that.
in the middle of the live stream, and those people didn't care that he was in the middle of live stream.
It's kind of like that here. So Geoff Schwartz, I was doing an interview on The Fanatic. He just started talking to me. I'm like, it's Geoff Schwartz, former offensive lineman. By the way, Jeff, how many teams did you play for? And he actually made a mistake. He said Giants, Chiefs, Vikings, Eagles. I said Eagles. He goes, oh yeah, I didn't play for the Eagles.
Panthers, all right.
Panthers, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, how does someone accidentally say they played for a team they never played for?
I did. Yeah, I don't know.
Because we have
course,
one
yeah.
kindred spirits.
Yeah.
He's great.
Both GEO Jeffs, right?
Should I go get him now?
Well, yeah. Let's
Go ahead.
let's get him on really quickly.
Yeah.
We're going to end hour one with Geoff Schwartz here, the former Chiefs offensive tackle.
Jeff, we get you on real quick.
This is great. Now, Geoff Schwartz and I don't know if I've ever met him,
Let's talk.
but we are bonded by the fact that we're both GEO Jeffs. And we once had a Twitter exchange about it because I think someone confused him for me and me for him.
Right here.
And as he comes and sits next to us, you'll see that there's no way you can
Two
confuse
spelled the same
both
way.
of us.
Geoff Mosher, Geoff Schwartz.
We welcome in former Chiefs, former
Yeah.
Panthers, and former
Giants,
Giants offensive
Vikings?
tackle
Vikings for a year
and
too.
Vikings.
Yeah.
Geoff Schwartz.
We forget that year.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Yeah.
I'm Geoff Mosher.
Hello.
I'm a GEOFF as
My
well.
guy. My guy.
Oh, yeah.
I don't-
No, let's
do
do
it.
this. Let's do
Okay.
this.
My guy. There we go.
We're
Thank you.
kindred spirits.
Yes.
We once had a Twitter exchange because I think someone, not a heated one, just because someone confused you for me and me for you just because of GEO.
Because our good looks probably too.
That was the second thing. That's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
even with the
Yeah.
avatar, they couldn't
They
tell the
could,
difference.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
figured. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So how you doing?
I'm good. It's a fun little week. Can you believe like a Super Bowl banner has an offensive lineman on it?
I know.
Like,
Well, there's two things
I know.
about this banner that we noticed yesterday. One, it's amazing that there's a center, not just an offensive line,
Yeah.
but a center. And two, of all the other Chiefs
Yeah, I know.
they
Should
could have
be
used
Kelsey.
with Mahomes, they choose Juju.
Like you could have had the brother thing on there.
yeah.
Like the first time, two black quarterbacks starting the NFL in the Super Bowl for the first time ever.
Right.
And then the two brothers, first time ever too. You could have had both of that
Brothers and
on the
brothers.
same banner. And then went with Juju, who's like the number 2.5 wide receiver at times for the Chiefs.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Come on,
Now,
Super Bowl committee
you bring this up. Your
Yeah.
brother also played
Yes.
in the NFL.
did.
Mitchell
Yes.
did, right?
Yes.
Right. And he was very good.
Yes.
How many times did you guys play? Now, you never played against each other,
Correct.
and neither will the Kelseys.
Yeah.
But what's that like?
So we in college we had a game. He was redshirting for Cal, and
Uh-huh.
Oregon played Cal, and then we played once in the NFL. He was on the Browns, came to Kansas City in 2013. It's weird because like you're when I was so I had to play my brother in practice the week
Uh-huh.
we played the Browns in 2013, and Justin Houston was the defensive end that was I was practicing against that week, and he's gonna go to my brother. It's like week 9 or 10, and Justin Houston would not rush me all week in practice. I'm like, why aren't you rushing me? He goes, well, you're gonna tell Mitch what I do. I'm like,
Wow. Wow.
no, I'm not. I'm like, Justin, it's week 10. He's seen all your moves. Like, he's seen what you're gonna do. He like refused to like doing all week. And it was very
I've never
funny.
heard that before.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not gonna tell my brother, I promise. Like the only thing I said all week to guys was like, look, I'm rooting for obviously the Chiefs, duh.
Uh-huh.
But I'm not rooting for my brother to stink. So like, I'm not gonna cheer if he gets a sack. He gave up like one of those 7 seconds quarterback gets sacked type of things. And someone came over like high five me, and I was like, screw you. We beat the Browns. But we beat the Browns. So
Oh my God, that's so great.
it ended up being a good day. But yeah, he's like didn't want to rush me that week.
I do.
Yeah.
I do
Wow.
feel like you have been a defense attorney for your brother at times. on
Oh,
Twitter.
yeah.
Well, because people don't understand offensive. I feel like I'm a defensive attorney for all offensive.
That-
linemen.
that's fair.
I feel like I'm equal opportunity. Like I'm out there. Like I want less holding calls. I want people to understand like what offensive line is about. And so I feel like I'm always going to be that guy. There's plenty of people that post negative content about offensive linemen. I'm not going to do that. I might point out there's a mistake here and there. I think that's fair game. But you can go to plenty of accounts that talk about offensive line penalties and holdings and who stinks who and whatnot. I'm not going to do that.
So, Jeff, when we look at Lane Johnson, same position your brother played,
Yeah.
doing as well as he has at this age, let's get into Lane Johnson. You've seen his tape 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of this guy?
Oh man, I mean, his consistency obviously is so hugely important. That the big kick, obviously he's not offsides. And
Yeah.
then his ability just to use his body. He's a huge human. He's a giant human. His arms go down to his knees. He's like long levered. So he uses his body, right? He gets in front of the defensive lineman. He knows if I get in front of him, I'm so big and so long, I'm not going to be beat. Like whatever you can do to me, you can't do if I'm in front of you. Like the thing about offensive line play that I think has evolved a lot now is like this idea of, yeah, we obviously need to punch a defensive lineman, but if we don't give the defensive lineman anything to work with, they don't have much to do as well. So my brother did really well too. Lane gets in front of the defensive lineman with that big kick and says, look, I'm not giving you my hands. I'm not giving you much. As soon as you go to do your move, boom, I'm going to have my hands on you right now. So like the consistency of his pass set all the time. And it really gives defensive linemen kind of nothing to work with. And obviously now he's dealing with the, with the groin. So we'll see if the Chiefs are able to take advantage of that. I mean, maybe Lane, maybe Chris Jones just tries to overpower him a little bit. If that can anchor on that leg, we'll see. But the consistency of that pass that over and over again is really impressive.
You know anything about Jeff Stoutland? Have you ever met him?
No, but I know he's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of Chip's first hires when he got to Philly. And he's made it through 3 coaching, regimes, obviously. It's pretty impressive. They have guys drafted in 2011, which was obviously before Jeff got there, all the way now through 2021. And obviously, Mulata in there is a 7th round pick, and Isaac is a 3rd round pick. Dickerson, they kind of got lucky with him falling down a little bit because of his injury. But you have this wide range of guys you've gotten to all play, and even the backups are all guys they drafted. I mean, they're a 1st round pick sitting on the bench. How many teams have 1st round picks just chilling on the bench? So, incredible job he's done. And like, there's no. I wrote an article for Fox Sports about the Eagles and Chiefs offense line, how they built them. Like, there's no checklist of what makes an offensive line coach good. To me, it's the ability to coach a techniques you like, but cater around what guys do best, right? So what Lane Johnson does and what Jordan Mulata do are two different things, and you can be okay with that, right? But I'm going to coach. I have certain principles. We're going to coach, but I'm also going to tailor what I do to what my guys do best. I mean, he has 5 different players, right? Like, Jason Kelsey is not a normal center. He does things other guys can't do. And so, but he tailors the offense, the run game, to what Jason can do, instead of being stubborn and saying, no, we're going to do, we're going to run only what I do because that's what I do. No, we're going to put Kelsey on the move more. We're going to full block because that's what Kelsey does best. And so that ability to adapt and evolve with your players puts you on a different level.
Let me ask you this follow-up, Jeff, on Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. If you were going to be a guy who'd be voting for the Hall of Fame, do you think they're worthy?
I think they are, yeah. Jason I think will for sure get in, because you look at that's like almost like one center a generation sort of gets in, maybe 2. Sometimes Mawai got in recently, kind of for that generation of centers. Jeff Saturday is kind of in that generation too. I don't think he's gonna, Mawai's kind of that guy for that group. And then this kind of upcoming, you have Pouncey maybe in there as well, and then you have Kelsey. But like the amount of all pros over the years, like the consistency of all pros, I think he's surely in. I mean, you're probably closer to the voting than I ever am with that. Lane's interesting too, because right tackle just hasn't been as focused on in the Hall of Fame voting. Willie Anderson getting in would be very helpful for Lane, obviously, at some point. But I think that, look, the PFF grading, agree, disagree with it. It's very helpful for Lane Johnson. It's helpful for how we evaluate offensive linemen now. And you look at Lane, you say, look, how many years was he the best offensive lineman at right tackle, or really one of the best tackles in all of football? Sure. How many times is he getting a 1st team All Pro from them, a 1st team All Pro from all? So I think when you add up, Lane's 33. I mean, he still could play 4 or 5 more years. Right. So I think Lane eventually is in too. But it'd be great if Willie Anderson got in too. That would kind of, I think, help Lane's candidacy.
You must have an appreciation as a lineman for just sort of even the simplest inside zones that the Eagles execute and just drive some of the best defensive linemen off the ball.
Well, it's interesting because, the Niners, the way they rush with kind of that upfield stance, it actually makes it easier to double those guys and kind of push them off the ball a little bit at times. So I'm curious how the Chiefs handle that, because one thing I think is not talked about enough in this game, I love what the Eagles do on 3rd down. They run the ball on 3rd and medium, which I love. More teams should do that. The Chiefs go with that smaller
because they know they're going for it on 4th down.
That too, but also because here's why: the Chiefs swap out their defensive tackles. They put Chris Jones at defensive end, put Frank Clark at defensive end. They bring Dan in. He's 255 and plays
right. Dan is good,
but just double team him, run the ball.
Right,
just run it right behind him. So if you're the Chiefs now, are you putting Dan in 3rd and 6? It gives more. It's more of these things for teams to worry about.
Sure.
Now I think the Chiefs can force Hurts to keep the ball a little bit on these RPOs and say, hey, look, we'd rather have you keep the ball than kind of do it up front. But you have to play. The Niners got in trouble because their linebackers played too slow. The linebackers were worried too much about Jalen Hurts. And so the Chiefs linebackers cannot, you have to say, look, linebackers, you focus on the run, on the running back. We have a safety handle Jalen Hurts. Leaves one-on-one coverage on the outside, but I think you live with that. You say, look, if Jalen Hurts, if you hit 50-50 balls to Smith and Brown, okay.
He's surprisingly, he's a really good downfield thrower, Hurts.
He is. No, but I think you just you just live with that. You're like, okay, we lost the game because of that. So be it. I don't think they want to get just 5 yards, 7
Sure,
yards.
sure.
I don't think you want that slow death.
Right.
I think you just live with like, let's try to stop the run as best as possible. If they hit some bombs, so be it.
They're gonna have to do some chipping on Hassan Reddick, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be curious how they do this because there's many different ways to go about helping offensive linemen formationally, even without a chip. You just kind of motion the tight end, give a little bluff, boom out.
Sure.
Because look, the Chiefs, the West Coast offense, they use those flood concepts, right? So they want those 3 layers on the passing game. Well, if a running back is chipping or tight end, that's one less guy in the passing game.
Right.
So you don't want to chip. You prefer not to do it. And so you go empty protection, you screen. There's different ways to do it without actually saying, look, we need to put a running back on that guy every single time. But yeah, they're gonna have to do a little bit of help. And look, at times, Brown and Wiley are gonna have single blocks. Like they're paid. Like you go block them.
Jeff, let me ask you this question. So your brother played for Andy Reid.
Yeah.
And all the volume of throwing that they've had.
Yes.
What did your brother think when he first got Andy? He's like, oh my goodness gracious, we're in for it now because we're gonna be standing up a lot.
Well, yeah, but also too, they don't help their tackles. Like my brother had no help for 5 years. Like they don't they pass the ball and then don't help the tackles. Look, I mean, that's what Andy is. Like, it's so funny. This coach, he's been head coach 24 years now, right? He's got all this winning, all the success, and people are still like, he doesn't run the ball enough. Yeah, I agree, but like, he's not going to change.
No, why change him?
It's like, you have the best player in this game. You have 15. Best player in this game. Like,
we haven't handed off?
Like, I understand. Yeah, I might want to throw the ball a little bit with that guy. Like, I get the lack of running. Look, I'm an offensive lineman. I think that it hurts them sometimes when they try to close out games. But if you're ending up with 15 having to throw the ball, you're not in a bad place.
Good point.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody who you've talked to already has asked you this question. You've answered it. Do you have a lean and a prediction here?
Look, I think the Eagles are a better roster.
Everyone
But
says that.
I mean, they're not. But it's not as bad. It's not as off as I think that we're not giving the Chiefs enough credit for how good they are.
Yeah,
they're here for a reason. I mean, their secondary has gone a lot better. That was a problem this year. They've got
Very young there.
Sneed's back, but Trent McDuffie's played a lot.
Yeah,
Well,
and
he's very
Kid
good.
Watson, the
Yeah,
7th rounder.
Yeah. I think the Chiefs wins ever so slightly because they have 15. Like that's
one of those
and-
things where he gets the
and,
ball with a few minutes left.
Like
and
he's like, if the Chiefs cannot be down by more than 7 points in the fourth quarter, if they're in a game where the
Agreed.
Eagles are running the football like that, no chance. If you're down 7, you have the ball, you score, you can kind of trade back and forth a little bit. But if you're at a point where the Eagles are just running the ball, you don't win that game.
I was going to ask you that when you see the Eagles when they decide they want to run the ball, it's unbelievable what
I
they're
don't
able
think
to
I
do.
don't think you can stop them.
That's so you as a former offensive lineman, you're like, yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so great to watch them do that. I love when anyone does that. Yeah, you're like that. The Chiefs have to avoid that 4-minute offense starting with like 12 minutes left in the game. Like they have to avoid that. And part of the way they're going to defer if they win the toss as usual. They can win that final 8 minutes, right? The middle 8 minutes, I should say. Like there's ways to kind of mitigate. Hopefully, in the fourth quarter, and say, look, it's a touchdown game. And if you're a touchdown game, you just need one stop at some point to get your kind of the math back on your side.
Yeah.
If it's more than that, I feel like the Chiefs are in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
how many times has someone called you Geoff in your life?
Like once a week. Who knows?
Who is named Geoff that would give somebody the impression
giraffe?
that our names are
No,
pronounced
also,
Geoff?
like, I get Gregory a bunch too.
I get Gregory all the time.
Gregory.
I prefer Gregory than Geoff though. Like
Yeah.
who is named Geoff?
Yeah, it's
Not
odd.
even internationally.
If people are like, oh, I've never met a Jeff with a G before. I'm like, okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
I always
Yeah.
say, well, you've never shopped at Toys R Us, and they're like, yeah, Jeffrey the Giraffe.
The G.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you know that's GEOFF. They're like,
Like,
yeah.
it's just it's
They still don't make the connection.
2023, guys. Come
I
on,
know.
figure it out.
Get with it.
Yeah.
We identify as Geoff.
Yes.
All right. All right. We're gonna thank Geoff Schwartz,
Yeah.
your former NFL lineman. Also, we're with works with Fox Sports. Where else can
Thank
we
you.
find your stuff?
My podcast, Geoff Schwartz is Smarter Than You, at Twitter at Geoff Schwartz as well. So check it out. I got my Super Bowl preview up there now.
Awesome.
All right. Excellent. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks,
joining
man.
us, Jeff.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Great stuff.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. All right. That is going to conclude hour 1 of Inside the Birds live from Radio Row. Thanks to Geoff Schwartz. Thanks, of course, to Greg Cosell. Thanks to everybody watching. Thanks to Ocean Casino Resort. And stick with us. We will take a short break. Come back for hour 2. We got Jason Avant coming up soon. We've got some other guys that I'm just going to drag in here, sit down, and do some great interviews with.
I love doing that. I love doing that. Hey, how about this guy? Sure. You never know. We're waiting for the actresses and actors to come in. Usually we get this on Thursday of the Super Bowl. So you never know who's going to show up at our table here at Inside the Birds.
All right. So also thanks to Andrew DeCecco. So for Andrew DeCecco, Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching Inside the Birds live from Radio Row.